In this alternate Second World War, the communist countries would be fighting against the ultranationalist countries of the Rome Protocols over European hegemony. The Comintern wants to liberate the workers of the continent and turn many countries communist, while the Rome Protocols wants to partition Germany and exploit the people that they conquer, due to their worsening economic situation. This is the final episode of Project Red World, so check out the full playlist to see all videos. This is how the continent could go up in flames, as Germany refused to pay war reparations to France, leading to the French declaration of war, bringing the entire web of alliances into one massive Second World War. This time, France wouldn't focus on defense, as they would pursue aggressive policy, so the marginal line most likely never is built. The people of the Saarland would see this as an opportunity, so the locals would arrest their leaders and dismantle the local parliament, effectively starting a civil war in the Saarland. France, and by extension the Rome Protocols, would expect this war to be quite easy, as Germany was legally limited to 80,000 soldiers. What they would soon find out is Germany is more prepared than they may seem. This would catch the French off guard, so they wouldn't be able to advance quickly on the front lines. This is because France had redirected most of their soldiers to Austria-Bohemia, as they wanted to quickly capture Berlin, which would be about 200 kilometers from the border of Austria-Bohemia. This underestimation of the German forces would be disastrous for France, as they wouldn't have the element of surprise and quickly capture the rich and industrious Rhineland. As for Austria-Bohemia, they are led by the Austrian painter, famous for looking like this cat. I mention this as to say that Austria-Bohemia would be more competent than you may think. I wouldn't be surprised if Austria-Bohemia would be the same strength as France, due to how effective the Austrian painter was at mobilization and propaganda. Just like how France wouldn't build a marginal line, Austria-Bohemia is unlikely to build fortifications on the border with Germany, unlike Czechoslovakia in our own history. This is because the foreign policy of Austria-Bohemia would be to unite all of the German speakers under their rule, so them going on the defense would not be wanted. This means that the Sudetenland is not fortified, but still the dense forests and the mountains make it difficult to move troops through there. This is why I expect Austria-Bohemia to try to take Munich, which is a German major city, heart of the Bavarian Soviet Republic, but also quite close to the border of Austria-Bohemia. The position of Germany in this war would be tough, as France is near their industrial heartland, while Austria-Bohemia is near their major cities, even the capital. To save Germany, the Soviet Union would need to do most of the heavy lifting, which I think that they would be more than competent to do. The year in this alternate Second World War would be 1930, during the Great Depression, so the Anglosphere would be doing very poorly, while the Rome Protocols are stagnating, and now, with them being in a war, their economies would start to shrink. The Comintern, on the other hand, lives in a vacuum, so the economic crisis doesn't concern them, which gives them a great advantage over their opponents. Turkey is a country that is not communist, but chooses to cooperate with the Comintern, due to them bordering 3 communist countries already, and the Soviet Union helping them win the Turkish War of Independence, but also promising them French Syria and Lebanon. To get this out of the way, I don't think that France can defend this front, and with the geographic proximity, the Soviet Union and Turkey would have an advantage, so all of Syria and Lebanon would fall to the Comintern. As a reminder, Japan is in this war as well, and they are fighting against the Soviet Union in the Far East. And considering that the fighting is happening in Siberia, you already know that the borders wouldn't move, but thousands would die. As for Europe, and especially the Balkans, Romania-Hungary would be in a really bad position. This is because historically both countries were weaker, at least compared to their size, which is almost twice as large as Austria-Bohemia, but Romania-Hungary is less competent. This is because of Hungarian separatism, which desires to leave Romania and take all of these claimed lands. Of course, these calls would be met with violence by Romania, and prominent Hungarian nationalists would be jailed or eliminated. The thing is that Romania-Hungary would be about the same as Austria-Hungary in our own history, which is to say that they would have a lot of territory and population, but the minorities problem would doom the nation to collapse. As Hungary would paralyze Romania-Hungary from within, the Slovaks and the South Slavs in the Hungarian portion would also rebel. This initial unrest would allow the Comintern to have the upper hand in this conflict, as the Soviet Union would take Bessarabia and Bukovina, while Bulgaria would advance to take northern Dobruja, linking up the Balkans with the Soviet Union. This is very important, as in the Balkans, the Rome Protocols have the exclaves of Italian Albania and Montenegro. Even with Italian help, I think that it's inevitable that Greece and Bulgaria, but also with Turkish support, that they capitulate and conquer these countries. This is only possible because of Italian incompetence. Italy tried to invade Greece in 1940, which is 10 years later in our own history. And as we all know, they couldn't succeed and even Greece started pushing Italy back to Albania. In this alternate history, we can assume that Italy would be the same in terms of incompetence, and since this war is happening 10 years earlier, they can suffer even more disastrous defeats. Spain is also on the side of the Rome protocols, but aside from money, there isn't anything for them to gain. The Spanish dictatorship is led by Francisco Franco, and the civil war in the country is looming due to the many still unresolved issues. This means that Spain doesn't have too much to gain out of this war, but they can risk a civil war in their own borders, so for simplicity I would downgrade Spain's color to supporter of the faction. Most of the important battles would happen all around Germany, which would be tasked purely with defense. I mentioned France and Austria-Bohemia wouldn't build defenses on their borders, as they plan to advance quickly on the front lines. The thing is that in this alternate history, Germany could be the one to be fortified and go on the defense. This is because the German Soviet Republic would know that France would inevitably invade, so I can see them fortifying the border and building the Ferdinand line. This means that Germany can compensate for their fewer soldiers and be able to hold out against France on their own. In the year of 1930, tanks were not as good as they were 10 years later, so the defensive side would still have a big advantage. While France is failing to make gains in Germany, Austria-Bohemia would prove to be quite successful. They would cross the border and near Munich, but also advance towards Dresden. Germany is in deep trouble, as if Berlin falls, the Austrian painter can legitimize his position as the future ruler of all Germans. This is why the Soviet Union would divert most of their forces to help out Germany while increasing their mobilization efforts. The Soviet Union would try to take Romania out of the war, as they would support the irredentist claims of Hungary if they were to switch sides. With the collapse of the Romanian portion, the Hungarians can see this as their only way at keeping their borders, even at the expense of communism. Thus, Romania-Hungary would cease to exist and the Romanian portion would be conquered by the Comintern. This would encourage Illyria to join the war on the side of the Comintern. The country was already an ally of the Comintern, but were not willing to join at the beginning of the war, due to them being surrounded on almost all sides by enemy countries. This is very important, as Illyria joining would open up another front against Austria-Bohemia, which although it would be very competent, they would find themselves fighting on almost all sides, while bordering incompetent Italy, which cannot help them in any way. The Illyrians would push to take the Istrian Peninsula, while also taking parts of Austria-Bohemia, but stopping at the mountains. This includes the major Austrian city of Klagenfurt am Wörthersee. The army of the Soviet Union, which was used to take down Romania, can now redirect itself straight towards Austria-Bohemia, but they can do that if they put pressure on Austria-Bohemia to the south and to the east, which, considering Vienna is right now on the border of Hungary, is really possible to happen. The Soviet army, but also the Hungarian loyalists, would try to take Vienna, which would be a fortress. This would result in the city to be encircled by the Comintern, while Austria-Bohemia retreats to more defensible positions to consolidate their forces. Belgium is only in this war because of Leopold III, which isn't even the country's monarch, but it's his father, Albert I. I said that Leopold is responsible for Belgium being in the war, as he would support the Catholic Party of Belgium, installing an ultranationalist type of government in the country. Considering this situation, I can see Leopold III to become hated within his own borders, as from the perspective of the Belgians, they would be on the losing side. This is especially important in Flanders, which wanted to join the Netherlands, rather than to remain in Belgium, which is looking to be losing, while their economy is also declining. I can absolutely see some Dutch and Flanders nationalists to assassinate Leopold III in Brussels, while the war is still ongoing. This is important, as Albert I would soon die of old age, so the succession line would be deeply disrupted. This is a detail that would matter later in the video. As for now, Austria-Bohemia is fighting for their life, but with Vienna being encircled, there would be no hope in sight, and eventually the city would fall. The Austrian painter would still believe that the war is not yet lost, but the Czech portion of the empire would betray him. The Comintern would promise to the Czechs a lot of autonomy within Germany, which is also a Soviet republic, so there the Czech language and religion would be freely practiced. This is better in contrast with the suppressive Austrian painter, which saw the Slavic people as subhuman, which has obviously antagonized the Czech population. The fact is that the Rome protocols would start this war during a massive economic crisis, as they would realize that this is their only shot at achieving a victory. If they were to wait, Germany and the Soviet Union would grow stronger, so this is why the Rome protocols decided to attack this soon. It was now or never for them. Not so long after the fall of Vienna, the Austrian painter would be deposed by Charles I and Austria would exit the war, awaiting their fate. This leaves only France and Italy as the two major countries in the Rome protocols, and the position for both is looking dire. During the same time, the Netherlands, which had some communist sympathies, would do the unexpected and join the Comintern, which promised them all of Belgium and even parts of northern France. This way Germany can do a variation of the Schlieffen plan, and since Belgium would grow to be very unstable, they would crumble under the pressure. So far, we can see that the Rome Protocols has been mostly made up of union countries, like Belgium being a union of Dutch and French speakers, Austria-Bohemia and Romania-Hungary being self-explanatory. The Great Depression with the ongoing World War is the reason why these countries would collapse to their ethnic lines under this amount of pressure. The Comintern would start advancing into northern France and Italy. As for the case of Italy, the vast majority of their industry is located up north. While the Alpine mountains can aid with defense, the Italian army would simply be outclassed and outnumbered, as they would have to fight against the Germans, Soviets and Illyrians. I can see the Comintern to make solid advances into northern Italy over time, which would trigger a civil war in Italy, as half of the country would decide to capitulate to the Comintern, while France would decide to directly occupy the other half. At this point, France would be fighting the entirety of Europe, and unfortunately for them, they are unlikely to surrender due to their insane ideology, so they would fight up until the last man. This would result in millions more casualties on both sides, something which could have been avoided. Francisco Franco would be deposed, and a republic in Spain would be established, making the country leave the war. Without delaying this any further, the Comintern would win this alternate Second World War, with Japan also losing their Asian holdings and fleeing to the mainland. In the peace treaty, the Soviet Union would retake Vladivostok, all of the Sakhalin Island, the Kuril Islands, with Korea being liberated under the Kim dynasty, so it would become a fully communist country. Manchuria would be awarded to Communist China, which I think would eventually come out on top of their civil war and unite the country under communism. As for Europe, this is where things get really interesting. The Netherlands would form the United Kingdom of the Netherlands, annexing all of Belgium and a bit of northern France. Germany would take out Eupen-Malmedy from Belgium, the Saarland, Luxembourg and Alsace-Lorraine from France. Turkey would annex the French possessions, forming Greater Turkey, under a socialist framework. Greece would take northern Epirus from Albania, with the rest of the country becoming socialist, but keeping Kosovo. Illyria is likely to annex Montenegro, but also Istria and Zadar from Italy. Romania-Hungary would be partitioned, with Hungary keeping their claimed territories, while the Soviet Union and Bulgaria would strip Romania out of their coastline, leaving a Romanian rump state. Austria-Bohemia would be entirely given to Germany, with the Czechs getting their promised Soviet in Germany. The Germans would also annex South Tyrol from Italy, forming Greater Germany and reaching their peak size. Italy would keep the rest of their land, but would be forced to go communist, which is possible under the civil war that happened in the country. Communists loyal to the Comintern would take charge and transform Italian society. As for France, they were already punished by losing a lot of land, but of course their government would have to change, as the Comintern would demand that the workers are liberated, so France would become also communist. Spain, as I mentioned earlier, would become a republic, but socialism in the country would be on the rise, so they would inevitably join the Comintern. The communist countries would practically dominate the whole continent, and countries like Switzerland and Serbia, which are being entirely surrounded by communist countries, would also eventually become communist, as they would have no other trading or political partners. Serbia may be forced to join with Illyria, which would be ruled by Tito, with Switzerland being partitioned between all of the members, partially improving France and Italy. The video is not yet over, something crucial for the future of the world would still happen, and this is decolonization. The Soviet Union would order that France and Italy liberate their colonies, and by liberate they mean give them independence under a communist framework. The African continent would be redrawn to look something like this, with some countries choosing to remain in a federation as to stay stronger. This is more important than you may think, as the communist countries would be not only seen as liberating the workers of Europe, but also liberating the native people from their colonizers. The world would recognize the Comintern as liberators, while the British and Americans are the oppressors and colonizers. This is because the United States of America directly controls the Philippines and Puerto Rico, while Britain has the largest colonial empire. The thing with decolonization is that it's like Pandora's box. Once it opens, it cannot be stopped. The French and Italians would decolonize, which would increase the cost for the British colonies to do the same. Britain will not want to do that, as they fear that if they decolonize, because of geographic proximity, the newly created states would inevitably become communist or be invaded by said communist countries. Either way, the Anglosphere is screwed, so they would eventually have to decolonize a couple of years or decades after France and Italy do the same. What I can see the world looking like after that is most of Europe is communist, so is most of Africa and even most of Asia. The Anglosphere would keep South Africa, Australia and New Zealand. Britain, the British Dominions and the United States of America would form a faction which would be called Oceania, and Japan would also be invited into this faction, as they are also free and seek protection. Oceania would expand into South America, where no communist countries would be allowed to exist. As we all know from our own history, the United States of America would gladly exchange a socialist for a brutal dictator, so the future of South America would be very rough. Of course, don't take this too seriously. I am trying to make something really entertaining, and I hope that I have succeeded with that in this series, as they are coming to a close, with this being the final episode. Next year I would start a new series that I'm more passionate about. Thank you for watching, check the video on the screen and I hope to see you there. Goodbye.